The moment his hand closed around the back of my nephew's collar, something in me went completely still. Not calm. Still. There's a difference. Calm is what you feel on a Sunday morning with coffee. Still is what happens when every single thing you've been trained to suppress suddenly has a reason to exist. His name was Brendan, my cousin. 23 years old, broad through the shoulders, the kind of guy who'd been the biggest person in every room since grade 9 and had never once had to reckon with what happens when that stops being enough. He was holding my sister's son, Connor, who was 11, by the collar of his hockey jersey. The Leafs one his dad had given him before things fell apart, and he was laughing. Not at a joke, at the look on Connor's face. I want you to understand what a Canada Day barbecue in Barrie looks like before I tell you what happened next. It's 2 fours of Molson in a cooler full of ice that's already half melted by 2 in the afternoon. It's lawn chairs pulled into a circle on a patchy backyard. It's someone's uncle burning burgers because he insisted on doing it himself, and someone's aunt complaining about the smoke. It's loud, and it smells like sunscreen and citronella, and it's supposed to be the one time of year where everyone agrees to set everything aside for a few hours and just be family. That's what it's supposed to be. I was standing near the back fence talking to my grandfather when it started. He'd been telling me about a fishing trip he'd taken up to Georgian Bay the weekend before, the kind of story that doesn't go anywhere but feels good to listen to anyway, and I had my back half turned to the yard. Then I heard Connor's voice crack in a way that wasn't laughing. I looked over. Brendan had him by the collar and was walking him backward, step by step toward the fence, telling him to stop being soft. Connor had said something. I found out later it was just that he didn't want to arm wrestle, that he was tired, that he just wanted to sit down, and Brendan had decided that was a character flaw worth correcting in front of 11 people. My grandfather stopped talking mid-sentence. He didn't say anything, he just watched my face. I've been doing what I always do at family events for the past 4 years, which is make myself as unremarkable as possible. I work for the federal government. That's what I tell people. It's technically true. I'm a logistics and intelligence analyst, which means almost nothing to most civilians and means everything to the people I work with, and I've been doing it since I was 22, and the training that came with it, the physical component, the close quarters work, the situational assessment that now runs in the background of my brain, the way antivirus software runs on a computer. None of that is visible on me when I'm standing in a backyard in shorts and a tank top, holding a can of ginger ale, apparently just my aunt's niece who turned out a little quiet and worked some kind of desk job in Ottawa. That's the version of me they had. I'd never corrected it. Brendan had been drinking since noon. I'd counted. Not on purpose, it's just a thing I do. 4 cans in about 2 hours, not falling down drunk. The particular kind of drunk where you feel larger than you are and everything seems like a good idea, and the inhibitions that keep most people from grabbing an 11-year-old by the collar in front of his family decide to take the afternoon off. I set my ginger ale down on the fence post. Connor was trying to twist away. Brendan was grinning, telling him to toughen up, asking him if he was going to cry. I walked across the yard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't announce myself. I came up behind Brendan at the angle that gave me the most options, and I said quietly, "Let him go." Brendan turned around slowly, the way people do when they're drunk and they've decided they're not going to be told what to do. He looked at me the way he'd been looking at me my whole life, like I was a footnote. His mother's sister's daughter, the quiet one, the boring one, the one who went to Ottawa and answered emails for the government or whatever. "Relax," he said. "We're just messing around." Connor looked at me over Brendan's shoulder. His eyes were doing the thing where a kid is trying very hard not to let anyone see that he wants to cry, which made something in my chest tighten into a knot I had to consciously set aside. "He's done messing around," I said. "So are you." That was when Brendan made the decision that, in retrospect, I think some part of him is still trying to make sense of. He let go of Connor. "Good. And then he took a step toward me, close enough that I could smell the beer, and he said, "You gonna make me." There were 11 people in that backyard. My grandmother, my aunt, my mother, 3 of my cousins, 2 of my cousins' spouses, my grandfather, Connor. The conversation nearest to us had stopped. I was aware of it the way I'm aware of most things. Registered, filed, not distracting. "Walk away," I said. One more time, I meant it. He didn't. He put his hand on my shoulder. Not a punch, not a shove, just that particular kind of grab that's meant to establish something, to say I'm bigger than you and we both know it, and the second his hand made contact I had already decided what was going to happen. What happened was this: I stepped into him instead of away, which is the thing most people don't expect because instinct says retreat. I dropped my weight, redirected the arm, and within 4 seconds Brendan was face down on the lawn with his arm locked behind him at an angle that made movement both difficult and unpleasant. I held it there for 2 more seconds, controlled, no longer than necessary, and then I released, stood up, and stepped back. He lay there for a moment. Then he rolled over and looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something closer to recalibration, like a machine trying to process an input it wasn't built for. The yard was completely silent. I looked at Connor. "You okay?" He nodded, still wide-eyed. "Go get a drink of water." He went. I turned to the rest of the yard. My aunt was standing with one hand over her mouth. My grandmother had her hand on my grandfather's arm. My mother was looking at me with an expression I recognized, not surprise exactly, but something complicated she'd been holding for a long time and didn't quite know what to do with. Brendan got up. He was embarrassed and drunk, and those two things combined are not a stable mixture. "What the hell?" he said. "You were hurting a child," I said. That was the end of it. It was a joke. It wasn't. What I did not expect, though maybe I should have, because I know these people, I've known them my whole life, was what happened next. It was Brendan's mother, my Aunt Lorraine, who spoke first. "That was completely out of line," she said, and she was looking at me. I took a breath. "He had a child by the collar. He was playing around and you attacked him, in front of everyone." Her voice was doing the thing voices do when someone is more upset about being embarrassed than about what actually happened. My mother said my name. I don't want to describe the tone because it'll sound worse on paper than it sounded in the yard, but it was the tone that means don't make this worse. It's a tone I've been hearing my whole life. Don't make this worse. Don't push. Don't embarrass the family. Smile and let it go. I've been letting it go since I was about 9 years old. I've gotten very tired of it. "His name is Connor," I said, "and he's 11 and he was scared and nobody else was moving." "You didn't have to take him down like some kind of—" Lorraine stopped, started again. "What is wrong with you?" "Nothing," I said. "Nothing is wrong with me." "You could have broken his arm." "I didn't." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Lorraine?" That was the wrong thing to say, or the right thing, depending on how you're scoring it. The yard reorganized itself the way yards do at family events when something real has finally been said out loud. People shifting, picking sides by proximity, someone going to get more beer as an excuse to leave the blast radius. Brendan was sitting in a lawn chair now, cradling his arm theatrically, talking to one of his friends in a low voice. His friend kept glancing at me. I could read the calculation happening in real time. He was deciding whether this was a situation he could laugh about and concluding, correctly, that it wasn't. My mother came to stand beside me. "Maybe you should apologize," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the way you handled it. You could have just—" "Just what, Mom?" She didn't answer, which meant she didn't have an answer, only an instinct. The same instinct she'd been running on my whole life. Keep the peace, smooth it over, absorb whatever you have to absorb and then apologize for the space you took up doing it. I love my mother. I want to be clear about that. She raised me by herself from when I was 14. She worked 2 jobs for 3 years. She drove 4 hours to Ottawa when I was sick in my second year and didn't make me feel guilty about it once. I love her completely. And she has my entire life looked at who I am and quietly, consistently tried to make me smaller so that the people around us would be more comfortable. I am 31 years old. I am not getting smaller anymore. I'm not going to apologize, I said. She looked at me like I'd said something in a language she didn't speak. Across the yard, I heard Lorraine say something to her husband that included the phrase, "She's always been like this," and felt the familiar, specific exhaustion of being a type rather than a person to the people who are supposed to know you best. My grandfather hadn't moved from his spot near the back fence. He was watching all of it. When I caught his eye, he gave me a very small nod, the kind that means, "I see you. Keep going." I've known since I was 17 that I was different from most of my family in ways that were going to become a problem eventually. My grandfather, my dad's father, which makes him technically my step-grandfather, though I've never thought of him that way, was the only one who ever looked at those differences and saw something worth cultivating instead of correcting. He was the one who drove me to my first CHISM training when I was 19. He was the one who asked questions when I came home instead of just waiting for the visit to end. He was the one when I'd gotten my security clearance and couldn't explain what I actually did for work, who looked at me at Christmas dinner and said quietly, so only I could hear, "I know it's important. That's enough for me." Nobody else in the yard knew what I actually did, what I was actually trained for. My mother knew I worked for the government and that it involved a lot of travel and that she wasn't allowed to ask too many questions. Lorraine knew I lived in Ottawa and apparently thought this was suspicious in some unspecified way. Brendan, before that afternoon, had once referred to me at a family dinner as a glorified secretary, and everyone had laughed, including my mother, and I had smiled and said nothing. Standing in that yard, I thought about that dinner. I thought about a lot of things. My mother tried again around 4 o'clock, catching me while I was inside getting more ice from the freezer. "He's embarrassed," she said. "If you just said sorry for overreacting." He had Connor by the collar. Kids play rough. Connor's 11 and Brendan's 23 and he wasn't playing. You don't know that. Mom. I set the ice bag down on the counter and looked at her directly. She's 4 inches shorter than me and we have the same eyes exactly. Dark brown with a slight downward tilt at the corners that people sometimes read as sad. How many secretaries do you know who could do what I did today? She was quiet for a moment. What does that? I've been trained, extensively, by people who take that kind of thing very seriously. What I used on Brendan today, I've used before, in situations you don't know about, and I used the minimum amount necessary, and Connor is fine, and your nephew is fine, and I'm not apologizing. I picked up the ice. I'll leave if you want me to, but I'm not apologizing to someone who was hurting a child. She looked at me for a long time. Why have you never told me? She finally said, and her voice was different. The frustration was gone. Something else was there instead, something smaller and more honest. Because it's complicated, I said, and because it never seemed like the right time. Is now the right time? Part of it, I said. Yeah. I went back outside. The barbecue had resumed with that particular, determined normality that happens when a family decides collectively to pretend a thing didn't occur. Someone turned the portable speaker back up. My uncle's second attempt at burgers was more successful. Connor was sitting with his mother, my cousin Jess, who had missed the whole thing. She'd been inside putting her toddler down for a nap and had come out to find her son looking shaken and her family behaving with suspicious cheerfulness. Jess found me by the fence. She didn't say anything for a second. Then he told me what happened. Yeah. Thank you, she said. Just that. She didn't perform it, or expand on it, or ask me to explain myself. Is he okay? He will be. She paused. He's going to think you're the coolest person alive for the next decade, just so you know. Something in my chest loosened a little. Lorraine is telling people you lost your temper, she said. I didn't lose my temper. I know. She looked at me sideways. That was actually the scariest part. Brennan left around 5. He didn't say goodbye to me. He said something to Lorraine on the way out, and she looked in my direction, and I looked back, and she looked away first. I don't know what he said. I don't think it mattered. My grandfather found me when the party was thinning out, when the mosquitoes were starting to win and people were packing up chairs and loading empty coolers back into trucks. He sat down next to me on the back step and we were quiet for a minute. Your father would have gotten a kick out of today, he finally said. My father died when I was 14. He was a warrant officer with the Canadian Army. 22 years of service, and he died not in a field somewhere, but in a car accident on the 400 on a Tuesday in November, which is the kind of ending that doesn't resolve anything, that doesn't mean anything, that just stops. I still find it hard to talk about in any register other than factual. He would have, I agreed. He used to worry about you, my grandfather said. Not the way your mother worries, a different kind. He thought you were too good at being invisible. He was quiet for a moment. He always said that was going to cost you something someday. Maybe. Or maybe it was just useful until it wasn't. He looked at me. His eyes are pale blue and very clear and have always made me feel like I'm being read accurately, which is rarer than people think. What you did today was right. I know. The boy needed someone. I know. They're going to talk about it. I know that too. He was quiet again. Then, I've always known, by the way, what you do, the broad strokes. I looked at him. Your father told me before he passed, said he'd set something in motion for you, and he wanted someone else to know. A small shrug. I've been waiting 4 years for you to say it out loud. I didn't say anything for a moment. The yard was nearly empty. Someone's kid had left a lawn dart in the grass and it was catching the low evening sun. I didn't want to explain it. You don't have to explain it to me, he said. You never did. I drove back to Ottawa the next morning. Before I left, I called Connor. He was staying with his grandmother for a few more days, and he answered on the second ring and sounded like himself again, which was the most important piece of information I'd received in 24 hours. Hey, I said, how's the arm? Fine, he said. How come you know how to do that? It's my job. Your job is like the government. Part of my job is the government, another part is that. He was quiet, processing. Cool, he said finally, in the tone 11-year-olds use when something has just moved into the top tier of things they will think about for years. Connor. I was on the 400 by then, the same highway my father died on in November, driving north in the direction of the city I'd chosen, watching the Canadian Shield open up on either side of me. If anything like that ever happens again, Brendan or anyone else, you have my number. You call me. Okay. I mean it. I know, he said. I could tell. I drove the rest of the way with the window partly down and the radio off. My grandfather texted me when I was about an hour out. Just a short line, the kind he's always sent, that says everything in the format of nothing. Good drive. Call me Tuesday. I did. There are things you carry for a long time before you understand that carrying them isn't the same as being defined by them. My family has a version of me that was built from years of watching me say nothing, absorb things, smile at the wrong moments, make myself unobtrusive. That version is not inaccurate. It's just incomplete. And I've decided, at 31, driving north on a Tuesday in July, with the Shield Rock rising gold in my windshield, that incomplete is no longer something I'm interested in being. My name is Avery Marchetti. I work for the federal government, among other things. And the strongest person at that barbecue was not the one who needed a child to be afraid of him to feel like one. I haven't heard from Brendan. I'm not waiting to. Connor called me the following Friday to tell me he'd started looking up Krav Maga classes in his area, and could I recommend a good one? And also, was it true you could learn to do what I did in under a year? I told him with enough work, yes. He said he was going to hold me to that. I told him I'd be counting on it. I keep thinking about the look on Brendan's face when he was lying on the grass, not the anger that came after that part I expected. The moment just before it, when he was still trying to understand what had happened, that 2-second window where everything he thought he knew about me had to be revised at once. That look cost him nothing to receive and cost me nothing to give, but it settled something I'd been carrying for a long time. Here's what I've come to understand about that afternoon and about the years that led to it. Actions have weight. Every time Brendan grabbed someone smaller and nothing happened, it confirmed for him that he could keep doing it. Every time I said nothing at a family dinner, when someone diminished me, it confirmed for them that I would keep absorbing it. We were both, in our own ways, operating on feedback. His told him there were no limits. Mine told me there was no point. Neither of those things was actually true. It just took one afternoon to show it. Connor is the part I come back to most. An 11-year-old in a Leafs jersey, trying not to cry in front of people who should have been the ones protecting him. Nobody moved. Not because they didn't see it, they all saw it, but because moving would have cost something social, something uncomfortable, and in that calculation a child's fear was not weighted heavily enough. I've thought about what it would have meant for Connor to watch every adult in that yard do the mental math and decide to stay in their lawn chairs. What that teaches a kid about what they're worth, what it teaches them about who shows up. That's the part that required no training. That was just a decision to let it matter enough to act. The integrity of that moment wasn't complicated. It was only uncomfortable. The intelligence part, knowing exactly how much force, when to stop, what the room was doing while it happened, that came from years of work. From choosing, when I was 19 and had other options, a path that was harder and less legible to the people who loved me. From not quitting when the training was genuinely painful and the explanations I could give were thin. That kind of knowing doesn't come from being talented. It comes from being willing to keep going past the point where it would have been easier to stop. And the part that kept me standing in that yard, not apologizing, not shrinking when my mother said my name in that tone, not walking across the grass to make Lorraine feel better. That was something I had to build over a long time, mostly quietly, mostly alone. The stubbornness to stay upright when the pressure is social rather than physical. That's its own kind of strength, and it doesn't get talked about enough because it doesn't look like anything from the outside. My grandfather texted me that evening. 6 words. Good drive. Call me Tuesday. That was it. 6 words from the one person in that yard who had always known exactly who I was and never once asked me to be less of it. I called him Tuesday. I always do.